In today's video, I'll talk about how we are relating and connecting to each other, which includes our families, our friends, even our coworkers, and maybe most importantly includes the relationship that we are in, our partners, how we show up with them, and are connecting to them. You see, often we have this desire as human beings to connect with people. It is part of what makes us feel fulfilled. And at the same time, it is freakingly scary. And I'm sure anyone who's ever been in an intimate relationship can attest to that, attest to the feeling of being extremely vulnerable as you are trying to connect to this other human being, and as you are allowing them to see your weaker sides, to see your shadow side, to show up fully as yourself. What that means is that often there is a desire to protect ourselves as we are trying to connect with them. Maybe there's even a desire to try to avoid connecting with them. And that desire to protect ourselves, or the actions that we are taking to protect ourselves, is often not necessarily logical or effective. And very often that can leave a negative impact on the relationship that will, in a lot of cases, actually end up causing the relationship to be dysfunctional, to be toxic, and that will, as a result, have us separate ways from our partners, that will have us break up in the relationship itself. Now, even though it sounds like a huge cliche, a lot of this desire to protect ourselves and our way of protecting ourselves are a result of our childhood. But not only that, also a result of how we are growing up and the relationship that we've experienced in the past, as well as our friendships, and as well as the connection that we'll have in general with people. So there is a theory called attachment theory, which basically explains 4 different styles that we are attaching to each other, or relating to each other, if you will. And as much as I hate labeling stuff, labeling people, labeling myself, and putting people and things in boxes, which I think can be extremely unhealthy, I've found that these 4 different styles are very helpful in helping us understand ourselves more, as well as understanding the other partner that we are with, and understanding why they are behaving in the ways that they are behaving, instead of just feeling hurt and maybe abandoned, maybe victimized, maybe rejected by them. It will help us understand them better, and which will then help us see the truth more objectively, instead of seeing the situation from a very subjective point of view. Now, the first one is called anxious preoccupied attachment. And it's basically when you get uncomfortable or feel unsafe in your relationship or anywhere else, you will have a strong desire to get closer to your partner, to get reassurance from them and feel certainty from them. And the types that usually will have this, you'll usually be able to relate to this type of attachment if you're in general feeling uncertain, feeling very judgmental towards yourself, in general feeling insecure about yourself, and quite possibly if you're in this attachment style, you'll have a very high view on your partner and on others in general, whereas you'll have a very low view on yourself. It's very common that you'll have your partners put on a pedestal and think very highly of them, which also means that you'll be a lot more afraid to lose them because you think that they are better than you. The second type is called dismissive avoidant attachment. In it, you're basically getting your feeling of safety from distancing yourself, from withdrawing from people, and not letting them see you in a weak and vulnerable position, which means that this type of attachment people will usually have a high sense of self-worth. They'll usually, in at least a fabricated way most of the time, think very highly of themselves and think less highly of others or their partners, which means a lot of the times they'll try to gain control over others or be in a more powerful position than others, also meaning that they won't show weakness, they won't show as much emotions, and they might seem very cold and distant to other people. Now, the third one is called fearful attachment, which is basically a mixture of the 2 bad ones. Basically a feeling of wanting to get close to people but being extremely scared of getting close to people and trying to sabotage it whenever you would get close to people. Now, the fourth and best one is called secure attachment, which basically means that you will be feeling comfortable, allowing people to get close to you. And at the same time, you'll feel comfortable allowing people to take their distance. Now, whereas the first one, you'll want to get as close to people as comfortable, and if you feel like they are rejecting you or trying to avoid you or create distance from you, you'll want to get even closer to them and get even more reassurance. And while the second type is the opposite, whenever people are getting closer to you, you'll shove even more off. You'll get even more distance, you'll push them further away. Now, why this is super relevant is that the second and the first type are in a ways complete opposites, but at the same time are always attracting each other. The reason being that the first one is trying to get reassurance and certainty, which they can get from the second type that wants to have a powerful position and have a lot of certainty and feel very powerful and in control. So the first type, anxious, will get a lot of that need for certainty and control from the first one, as well as it triggers their fear of getting rejected, and so they'll try to get closer and closer when they start feeling that the second one, the dismissive one, is trying to push them away. Meanwhile, the dismissive one needs a feeling of power, needs a feeling of control, and so they'll be able to see the first one, the anxious one, in a less powerful position because they are chasing them, and so they'll be able to keep their frame of being in a position of power because the other one will seemingly be in position of need, being in a position of weakness, and the first one, the anxious one, being a lot more open to showing their weaknesses, to show vulnerability. The second one, the dismissive one, can see that and see them as weak and see themselves as powerful by allowing them to have their weaknesses and by not needing to show that themselves. So those two are very keen to attracting each other. Now the problem is that when they attract each other, the first one will feel extremely rejected by the second one. The anxious will feel rejected by the dismissive one because the dismissive one is pushing them away, is not showing off any weakness, not showing off vulnerability. And so the first one will feel that and will feel a desire to get closer to them, which means that they'll always be in a nervous position, an anxious position, because they can't get as close to the other partner as they want. Meanwhile, the other partner will see them constantly trying to get close to them and will often maybe feel like they are evil, they're a bad partner, because they feel a need to reclaim their distance, their space. And so they'll hurt the other one, and meanwhile they'll also feel this huge burden of always having to comfort them, always having to reassure them and give them their certainty while there's no room for them to fill in their own weaknesses, to feel and get any reassurance, get any certainty back from the other partner. And very often what will happen is that it will end in a downward spiral of a toxic relationship. It will end in a downward spiral of pain and negativity because they'll start resenting each other. The anxious one will resent the avoidant one because they won't show any vulnerability. They won't allow an emotional connection through vulnerability and allow the other partner to have any emotional impact on them. Meanwhile, the avoidant, dismissive one will start resenting the anxious one because they look so weak and they don't allow themselves to look weak, they don't allow themselves to be as emotional, and they will resent them because they have to carry that burden of always caring for the other one and not being able to reclaim their own distance because the other one will always try to get it from them. They will always try to take their distance away and get closer. Now obviously these are in a sense archetypes and can be extreme examples for some, but for some this might be actually not as extreme as what the reality is for them. Again, I want to make it clear that I don't believe in labels because as soon as we identify with something, we are much more likely to not change our paradigm and see it from a different angle because we are bought into an idea of how we are, which makes it harder for us to change. Because sometimes all we need to do is understand that we don't have to behave or believe a certain thing anymore. And often that might be enough to just help us grow out of a certain system, a certain way of operating. a certain reality that we are reinforcing just by shifting our paradigms. But that being said, when we understand why our partners are showing up the way they're showing up, and understand that it has nothing to do with us, but everything to do with their reality, with their inner hurt child, with their traumas, then we will be able to feel a lot more compassion for them, and maybe a lot more compassion for ourselves when we understand that it's not because we are fundamentally wrong in the way we're created, but that something in the past might have hurt us that makes us feel a certain way, that makes us act a certain way, that makes us show up in a certain way, that are in one sense out of our control, and in another sense we still have the responsibility of being able to change that. So understand that meanwhile you might relate a lot to one of these attachment styles. That is not all that you are, and at the same time we all have different parts of it in us. So we might be able to relate more to one than the others, but that doesn't mean that the others will never show up in our lives, that we'll never act out of the other attachment styles or whatever. But more that one of them is probably more dominant in your life than the others, especially when it comes to a certain type of relationship. Usually, especially when it comes to romantic relationships, because that's when we feel most vulnerable and when we crave to connect the deepest. Now, the way that we can get over these, because luckily they're not set in stone like anything is, and we can outgrow them. One way being conscious about this will help us understand what we are more inclined to look for in a partner. So if you are aware that you are an anxious, preoccupied attachment style person, then you'll be able to understand that you're probably more inclined to feel an attraction for someone who's dismissive, for someone who's avoidant, and that will try to push you away from them. So knowing that, you can search for someone who has a more secure sense of attachment, who will actually be willing to let you come close to them and be willing to open up emotionally themselves and be vulnerable with you, which will make you feel connected to that person and will make you feel like you aren't a failure, like you're worthy, that you're loved, which is most likely what you're craving if you are in a relationship with an avoidant, dismissive attachment style person. Because one of the easier ways to fix it is that when you get in a relationship, to choose your partner consciously, to be aware of their flaws and their positives in a way, to be aware of how they are behaving and how they are showing up, so that you can avoid getting into a relationship with someone who could potentially harm you in an emotional way, who can potentially make you feel rejected, make you feel not good enough. So by getting into a relationship with someone that is secure in their attachment style, it will be easier for you to outgrow it, because they'll continuously be able to prove to you that you are worthy, that you are good enough, that you are loved, which is essentially why we are having these negative attachment styles, is because we are afraid that we are unworthy on a deep, deep level. Whether you are dismissive, avoidant, or preoccupied and anxious, the fundamental reason why is still the same, that you felt unloved at some point, that you feel unworthy at some point, and so you develop this attachment style as a way of dealing with it, as a way of fixing that. So the other fundamental way that you can change it without depending on another partner, even though finding another partner that will be able to help you outgrow it and that will make that commitment to you is amazing. A fundamental way that you can change this is by learning to love yourself more, by growing your self-love and practicing on a daily basis loving yourself. And I've already made videos about this in the past. Really, I recommend my videos on vulnerability. They were some of my favorite videos to make, and they truly, truly helped me feel more self-love in a sense. So the two ways to outgrow this attachment style that can really negatively impact your life, because if you're an anxious attachment style person, you will feel often that it'll be hard to focus on anything, because you'll have such a profound sense of anxiety when you feel disconnected from your partner. And I'm sure if you can relate to that attachment style, you know what I'm talking about. It can feel like your whole world is crashing down, like you are on an emotional level dying, unless you find a way to reconnect and get reassurance from your partner. And if you are an avoidant, dismissive personality or sorry, if you're an avoidant, dismissive, attachment style person, you might feel very confident and that you don't need any kind of relationship, any type of person to get close to you, because you feel so confident in who you are and that you don't need relationship. But relationships are a deep, deep part of what makes us feel very fulfilled in life. And it helps us face the world with a lot more bravery, a lot more confidence, and gives us a peace of mind when we have a relationship that can fully function. We are human beings are craving this kind of connection, and so to think that we don't need it is not really true in a sense. Even though you might be confident and think that you're better and that you are too good to need anything in life, relationships are a fundamental part of being human. So you will need some kind of connection with other people. Not saying that you can't be happy without a relationship at all, but connecting with people and being able to be vulnerable in front of other people are a deep part of being a human and deep part of being fulfilled in life. And finally, if you're in the fearful attachment style, you'll for sure have a mixture of the two negative ones, of the anxious, preoccupied and the dismissive, avoidant attachment style, and still won't be able to fully function or at least be as fulfilled as you potentially could be unless you outgrow that attachment style. So again, the two ways that we can outgrow them is in our relationship, finding a partner that has a secure attachment style and that are committed to helping us outgrow ours, that are willing to help us outgrow ours, and that are willing to be flexible in the sense that they will need to either allow us to take our distance until we feel comfortable coming closer to them, or that they are willing to help us, giving us reassurance and help us prove that we are lovable, that we are enough, that we are worthy of their love, and help us grow our inner confidence that way. The second one is to have that fundamental strong confidence that comes with self-love, that strong inner sense of being relaxed, being at peace inside of ourselves from that fundament that is self-love, that is so important in our lives. And if we have that, regardless of which attachment style we are, it will be a lot easier for us to move into a strong secure attachment style and be able to have a functional, healthy relationship. Because chances are, if we are in a negative or toxic relationship, that it is due to one of these attachment styles that we aren't outgrowing at the moment. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to have a certain type of relationship or that you can't be happy without outgrowing it, but it will be probably a lot more peaceful in your life and a lot more fulfilling, that relationship, if you're capable of moving past it with your partner or by yourself before getting in a relationship in the first place. So if you can relate to that at all, please do let me know. Please do subscribe. I will deeply appreciate it, and thank you so much for watching. Remember to stay true to you.